NSA trilateral meeting concludes. India, Sri Lanka and the Maldives agree to strengthen security cooperation. Anura Kumara Disanayake speaks about the international influence on the crude oil sector.
චීන වරාය අපේ තෙල් ටැංකි සංකේතයේ IOC සමාගමට දුන්නා. නල පද්ධතිය කපාගෙන ගියා. පිත්තල හොඳ ඉන්දියාවට අරන් ගියා. ඒකේ තිබුණ කරාමටික් ගලවගෙන ගියා ඉන්දියාවට.
COVID-19 death toll in Sri Lanka passes 100. 430 make full recovery today. Decision on holding ordinary level examinations within 7 days. Control the spread of the Sena caterpillar. A plea from the farmers. DIG Adit Rohana says important recommendations for the Anti-Terror Act were not included in the final draft presented to Parliament.
Very good evening. You're watching Primetime News on TV1, bringing you the news. I'm Tharusha Kumar Singha. On to a more comprehensive look of those stories and more. The 4th National Security Advisor Level Trilateral Meeting on Maritime Security Cooperation was held in Colombo today. According to a joint statement from the Ministry of Defence, representatives from India, the Maldives and Sri Lanka attended the meeting, while Mauritius and Seychelles were represented virtually at the senior officials level.
Shri Ajit Doal, the National Security Advisor of India, Maria Didi, the Minister of Defence of the Maldives, and retired Major General Kamal Gunaratne, the Secretary of Defence of Sri Lanka, were among those present at the meeting. According to the joint statement, the past deliberations of the trilateral NSA level meeting on maritime cooperation have helped Sri Lanka, India and the Maldives in improving close coordination in maritime security of the region. At the meeting, the three countries took stock of the current maritime security environment in the region and discussed mutual cooperation in the areas of maritime domain awareness, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, joint exercises, marine pollution and marine underwater heritage. According to the joint statement, the countries agreed to further strengthen cooperation to ensure peace and security in the region for common benefit. The heads of delegations also agreed to meet regularly to share, discuss and ensure timely implementation of decisions taken at the meeting. The dialogue was conducted adhering to strict guidelines using the air bubble concept for the visiting delegations.
Defence Minister of the Maldives, Maria Ahmed, and the Maldivian delegation who arrived in the country for the 4th National Security Advisor Level Trilateral meeting met with Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa yesterday. A communique issued by the Prime Minister's office said that discussions focused on regional security. Discussions were also held on strengthening ties to curb drug trafficking, organised criminal gangs, and on areas including prison reforms and security cooperation.
India's National Security Advisor Shri Ajit Doal paid a courtesy call on Defence Secretary, retired Major General Kamal Gunaratne yesterday. The officials discussed on a collaborative mechanism to enhance maritime cooperation, intelligence sharing, capacity building within the region, avenues to curb drug smuggling and means of responding to natural calamities during the session. Meanwhile, retired Major General Gunaratne extended his gratitude for the support extended by the Indian authorities to douse the fire triggered on board MT New Diamond recently. Maldivian Defence Minister Maria Ahmed also met with Defence Secretary, retired Major General Kamal Gunaratne yesterday. Discussions were held on curbing drug trafficking and sharing intelligence among the two nations.
We know that India was on the lookout to get an Indian company to run the Colombo East Container Terminal. A cabinet paper has already been approved to hand this over to them. No matter how the government tries to interpret the arrival of the Indian National Security Advisor, we are extremely suspicious that there are other motives behind his visit that comes at a time when the COVID-19 pandemic is fast spreading in the country. With the government's poor economic management and administrative shortcomings, we are suspicious that they are now trying to grab this port from under our noses when the government is down on their feet. On one hand, Namal Rajapaksa is saying that this port will not be given to anyone. The subject minister has a completely different stance on the matter, while the Prime Minister is of another stance. Leaving all of those opinions aside, a cabinet paper has been presented by the chairman of the Ports Authority. The President, the Prime Minister or the Minister in charge of the subject must clarify as to if this port will be handed over to any other country or a foreign company.
Meanwhile, the Minister of Ports and Shipping, Rohit Gunawardena, said that there is no connection between the arrival of the Indian National Security Advisor and the operations of the East Container Terminal being handed over to an Indian company.
I believe that there must be no confusion here. The National Security Advisor of India arrived in Sri Lanka to discuss security cooperation between the two nations. On the other matter, it is the Minister of Ports of that country who should hold discussions with me. Activities at the ECT have begun. We have called in an investor who is willing to invest $600 million. The West Terminal will also be contributing to the national economy by next year.
However, trade unions continue to reiterate in the past that the East Container Terminal can be operationalized through resources available at the Sri Lanka Ports Authority.
We constructed this using Sri Lankan technology. Local engineers designed the terminal. We do not need technical assistance from other nations. There is no point in allowing other entities to reap the benefits of this terminal. We regret the decisions made in hindsight without realizing the importance of these resources. The Ports Authority has all the required funds for the development of this terminal. We have already established that. Already the small section of the terminal that operates generates an income of 27 million rupees. So all of this is being done with an ulterior motive. Remember that all the employees at the port, the trade unions and the engineers are of the stance that we can do this. Why are we handing this over to a foreign company? They always say that we don't have money in the country while selling all our assets that can generate money.
Meanwhile, leader of the Jatika Jana Balawege, Anura Kumar Dissanayake, expressed the following views in Parliament today regarding the Indian influence on Sri Lanka's crude oil sector.
More than
90% of crude oil stored in facilities in Kolonnava and Muthurajavela are owned by the CPC, but the profit is enjoyed by the IOC. This is our oil stored in our facilities, but the profit goes to the IOC. 1 million metric tons of oil can be stored at the Trincomalee port owned by the Chinese. The port was handed over to India by the UNP in a temporary agreement in 2003 on the promise of signing a new agreement in 6 months, but no new agreement was signed. Therefore, the temporary agreement was invalid after that. There is no agreement at present with India. An article about these oil tanks has been included in the 3rd section of the Indo-Sri Lanka agreement. Because of that, India was always greedy for this. Former Minister Chandima Veerakkodi presented a cabinet paper in the past. The cabinet agreed to take back these 16 oil tanks under the purview of the CPC. But for the first time in history, Ranil Wickremesinghe presented a cabinet paper abolishing the previous cabinet order. From that, taking back this oil tank complex was prevented. The IOC taxes us 60 million annually. Then we have to pay them 42 million for using their oil tanks. It is simple as renting my house for 1,000 rupees and purchasing a room from the same house for 20,000 rupees. These are ridiculous decisions like that. Are we to take back this oil tank complex or not? The government has to make a decision. The oil tanks at the Trincomalee port was given to the IOC. They took the pipeline system. Good brass was taken to India. These are national resources. What is the definition of patriotism? Kissing the ground or beating your chest is not patriotism. But are these so-called patriots willing to safeguard our national resources for our future generations? This government has to provide answers in Parliament today whether they are going to sell these national resources to foreign entities. But the agreement is invalid now. It was signed only for a period of 6 months. That was a temporary agreement. No new agreement was signed. The Indian companies have not paid their taxes too. They have not even paid the 1,000 rupees. Therefore, I reiterate that getting back this oil tank complex will be pivotal in the oil sector of Sri Lanka.
Deviating your attention away from the political arena of the country, Amnesty International South Asia launched an urgent action campaign yesterday on behalf of former police investigator Shani Abeysekara, who tested positive for COVID-19 on the 24th of November this year.
Amnesty International South Asia announced the campaign on Twitter this morning. Quoting the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, Amnesty International South Asia pointed out that he was recently transferred to a remote prisoner treatment centre. Amnesty International South Asia further said that it was reported against his wishes and without his family being informed of his health situation or whereabouts. Amnesty International points out that he has been detained on the 31st of July 2020 and his family believes that he is being targeted for exposing human rights abuses implicating top politicians. Amnesty International expresses grave concern for his life, safety, health and well-being as he suffers from existing heart conditions and diabetes.
More news from the parliamentary proceedings today. TNA parliamentarian M.A. Sumandiran spoke in Parliament today regarding preparations to name him as a respondent who is evading the Presidential Commission inquiring into political victimization.
I received another summons dated 17th October 2020, which came by post on the 20th of October 2020, and I saw it after I returned from Parliament sittings on the same day. I responded by letter dated 22nd October, repeating what I had said in the several communications previously, and also indicating that I had parliamentary sittings on the same day and therefore could not appear before the Commission. Despite the above, I read in the newspapers on 27th October 2020 that at the sittings held on 26th of October, the chairman of this Commission, Upali Aberatna, had stated in public that several parliamentarians, including myself, will be named for evading the Commission. The aforesaid conduct by the said Commission of Inquiry is in breach of my privilege as a Member of Parliament. I urge the Honourable Speaker to take urgent and immediate action in this regard.
While COVID-19 continues to grip the nation, the fall armyworm menace, which poses a significant threat to the livelihoods of farming communities, still prevails in the country. Farming communities affected by this menace bemoan neither an alternative nor a solution has been provided to them as of yet.
Farmers in Ampara engage in tireless efforts to protect their crops from the Sena caterpillar. A portion of the farmers in Pannalgama, which falls under the purview of the Damana Divisional Secretariat, grow paddy since there is an abundance of water sources, while another portion carry out chena cultivations due to the lack of it. Maize cultivation is the most popular among those engaged in chena cultivation in the area. This group of farmers are the ones who are battered by the Sena caterpillar. We incurred many losses due to this menace. These people will have to ingest poison if they are unable to reap a harvest because they engage in chena cultivation only once a year. The coronavirus has aggravated this even more. We have not received any sort of compensation for the losses we have suffered.
No one will lend an ear to our plight. We obtained a loan worth 150,000 to cultivate. It has also been insured for around 11,000 rupees. We have not received any compensation from that either.
We were caught up in a severe drought. That forced us to cultivate once again. We had to pawn our own belongings. It has been a month since we sowed this land. We cannot eradicate this through any method. Although nearly 1,500 acres of maize has been cultivated by those in Pannalgama, their hope of reaping a healthy harvest is slim. Farmers lament the worms evolve into moths and lay eggs on crops once more when the effects of pesticides wear off. Moths which fly into farmlands at night were caught in a trap that was set up by residents. The Sena caterpillar wreaked havoc in a similar fashion in the years of 2019 and 2018. A common grievance is that those affected by the Sena caterpillar menace are yet to receive compensation for the damages caused by it. By today, those farmers are in a severe debt crisis. Regardless of the hardships, they remain hopeful of better days to come.
From one disaster that has impacted the nation to another. The COVID-19 death toll in the country topped 100 after 8 more COVID-19 related deaths were reported yesterday.
274 COVID-19 cases were reported in the country today. 430 patients were discharged after making a full recovery. A total of 22,775 COVID-19 patients have been reported in Sri Lanka thus far. 6,012 patients are currently receiving treatment. No COVID-19 related deaths have been reported today thus far. A total of 16,656 patients have recovered from the virus. The COVID-19 death toll in the country now stands at 107. The 8 COVID-19 related deaths were all residents of Colombo. A prison inmate is also among the deceased. An 87-year-old resident of Colombo 13 passed away at her home due to a COVID-19 induced heart attack on the 23rd of this month. A 54-year-old resident of Demaragoda died of complications in cancer and pneumonia triggered by COVID-19. A 78-year-old resident of Maradana died of a COVID-19 induced heart attack on the 25th of this month. A 36-year-old resident of Colombo 15 infected with COVID-19 passed away on the 27th of this month after he was transferred to the IDH from the Colombo National Hospital. He died of complications in a congenital lung condition. An 83-year-old resident of Colombo 2 died of a heart attack induced by COVID-19 on the 26th of this month. A 58-year-old resident of Maligavatta passed away at her residence on the 26th of this month. The cause of her death was identified as complications in a congenital kidney ailment and diabetes triggered by COVID-19. A 69-year-old resident of Colombo 13 died at his residence on the 25th of this month due to complications of a congenital lung condition that intensified into pneumonia due to COVID-19. A 70-year-old inmate of the Magazine prison died of COVID-19 on the 25th of this month. The Government Information Department said that a kidney-related complication triggered by COVID-19 was the cause of his death. 138 patients of the 473 total patients identified yesterday were from the Colombo district.
Meanwhile, a doctor practicing privately in Anguruvela, Ruanvalla, has contracted COVID-19. The public health inspector said that the doctor had not followed health guidelines while practicing at his medical centre.
He had treated patients without adhering to health guidelines. Many patients had visited this doctor daily. Patients who received treatment from this doctor had done so without following health guidelines.
කොරෝනා රෝගය ආසාදනය වී ඇති බව කනගාටු වෙන්නෝද අපි ඔබට මතක් කර සිටිනවා. අඟුරුවැල්ල පෞද්ගලික වෛද්‍ය මධ්‍යස්ථානයෙන් ප්‍රතිකාර ලබා ගත්තේ නම් වහාම නිරෝධායන කටයුතු ආරම්භ කරන ලෙස අපි ඔබට මතක් කර සිටිමු.
The doctor and his wife have been admitted to the IDH. Meanwhile, 17 staff members of the Kandy General Hospital, including a doctor, have contracted COVID-19. 2 nurses at the hospital tested positive for COVID-19 yesterday. The staff members who were identified as close contacts were subject to PCR tests today. Meanwhile, police officers at the Valipenna police station were quarantined at their homes after the OIC of the police station tested positive for COVID-19. According to a correspondent, operations of this police station have been diverted to other police stations in the vicinity. Meanwhile, Navy personnel monitored areas in Atulugama that have been placed under lockdown. They travelled in boats along the Kapu Ella in Atulugama. Essential items were also distributed among the residents of the area. The Air Force used a Bell 212 helicopter to monitor the movement of people in the area upon a request made by the police. Presidential pardons have been granted to a number of prisoners due to the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Commissioner General of Prisons Tushara Upuldeniya said no inmates who have been convicted of serious offences will be given a presidential pardon. Inmates at prisons who are either pardoned or released on bail will first be subject to a 14-day quarantine period before being released. Administrative Commissioner of Prisons Chandana Ekanayaka said that they will be sent to outdoor prison camps in Pallekele and Veeravilla. This is how inmates of the Anuradhapura prison were released.
නීතිපති දෙපාර්තමේන්තයේ ආපු නීතියක් අනුව සිරකරුවන් නිසියාකාරව අපි නිදහස් කරනවා.
Meanwhile, the number of COVID-19 patients reported from prisons has increased to 908. 87 cases were identified today. A majority of cases were reported from the Valikade prison. 52 prison officials have also contracted the virus.
If you have been identified as a close contact of an infected patient, please cooperate and submit yourself to a PCR test. Stay indoors and avoid travelling until you obtain the test results.
the Sri Lanka police has issued a stern warning against those who are refraining from undergoing PCR tests when they have been advised to do so.
If you have been asked to submit to a PCR test by a health official, it is considered as a part of the quarantine law. If certain individuals breach these laws, cases will be filed against them. The government can also confiscate the vehicles that they travel on and other property. We have received reports that people in Atalugama have not undergone PCR tests. Our request from you is to take part in those tests. We have also received reports that an organized group is spreading information through social media among those in isolated areas, asking them not to take part in PCR tests. We are conducting investigations to identify those people and institute legal action against them.
Minister of Education Professor G.L. Piris announced in Parliament today that a final decision on the date of the GCE O-level examination will be made within a week.
Dates have been finalized for the O-level exam to be held based on the decisions made up to now. The exam is to be held from the 18th to the 27th of January 2021. If the status quo persists and we are unable to reopen schools, we will need to re-evaluate the decision and postpone the exam, even unwillingly. We have not decided on that yet and expect to reach a decision on that matter within a week.
The Vice-Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya, Professor Upul Disanayake, said that research is being carried out in order to develop antigen test kits to cure COVID-19. He said that the test kits will be available for an affordable price in the near future.
The annual conference of the Postgraduate Institute of the University of Peradeniya was held today under the patronage of Chairman of the University Grants Commission, Professor Sambat Amaratunga.
As of now, the progress of the research to develop an antigen test kit for COVID-19 has been a success. We are currently working on making this test kit an affordable and efficient test kit. Based on government requirements, around 400 to 500 tests could be done per day.
අවසකට 400 500ක වුණත් PCR ප්‍රමාණයක් කරලා දෙන්න පුළුවන් ඒ රජයේ අවශ්‍යතාවය මත.
The chairman of the University Grants Commission expressed his views regarding the reopening of universities which were closed due to COVID-19 situation in the country.
The country will not be able to take the chance of COVID-19 spreading in the hostel premises where 2,000 students live. Therefore, arrangements are being made for students to study from home.
The island-wide token strike launched by officials attached to 8 wildlife trade unions yesterday concluded today.
Officials attached to the wild elephant unit of the northwestern zone who temporarily halted their operations due to the token strike yesterday recommenced operations today. A mission was launched on the 25th of this month to chase away wild elephants which have been encroaching on the villages of Dambulupura and Thalawa in the Tambuttegama Divisional Secretariat over a number of years and causing extensive damages to the villages, and to also capture a violent wild elephant. Wildlife officials engaged in the tedious task of attempting to capture the wild elephant until this evening. The elephant, dubbed Niyaputta, is to be captured and transferred to the Horowpatana elephant holding ground. Subject Minister C.B. Ratnayaka also arrived in the area to assess the progress of the mission which was underway. Wildlife officers attached to national parks and regional officers in the Polonnaru district reported for duty as usual this morning. Officials of the Hikkadua Wildlife Office who supported the token strike which was commenced to oppose the actions of the State Minister, recommenced their work today. Meanwhile, the officer in charge of the Maduru Oya National Park expressed views in relation to a timber racket taking place within the park. A number of entities are party to this. Political influencers exist as well because the relatives of those who engage in timber rackets in the area are regional politicians. Owners of timber mills join in on this as well. This is a joint racket carried out by all these parties. Teak trees are grown through the entire eastern border, making it easier for them to remove the timber from the jungle to transport it to the nearest timber mill. Legal action should be instituted against this, not only through the Department of Wildlife but other institutions as well. There are timber mills situated 300 to 400 meters away from the national park.
a certain decision should be made regarding these mills as well.
සියලා ආසන්නයේත් ලීමෝල් තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා මම ඒකයි කිව්වේ මේ සම්බන්ධව යම් පියවරක් ගත යුතුයි මේ ලීමෝල් සම්බන්ධවත්.
A number of cabinet ministers expressed their opinion regarding the argument which ensued between State Minister Wimalavira Dissanayake and wildlife officials. There are wildlife officials who are genuinely dedicated to protect sensitive ecosystems of our country. We value their service. If certain parties attempt to hinder their duties, we do not condone those acts. It is not only the wildlife officials' responsibility but the country's responsibility to protect these sensitive ecosystems. No one can intimidate another. That word should not be used. We should be able to solve an issue through an open dialogue. I am not vested with the power, even as a cabinet minister, to intimidate officials, even if it is an official who has engaged in wrongdoing. There is a civilized way to correct a wrong. We will shield state officials who perform their duties to the best of their abilities. Certain politicians may go down a wrong path at times, but we as the government will not publicly justify those acts.
එතුමා ඒ කාරණේදී ප්‍රශ්නේ විසඳීම සඳහා ගත්තා වූ ක්‍රියාදාමයේ වැරද්දක් තියෙනවා කියලා මම දකිනවා. ඒක කාමරය ඇතුළේදී කතා කරන්න ඕන එකක්. ඔබට විවුර්ත කෙරුවා ඔබට විකුණන්න පුළුවන්කම තියෙනවා. ඔබ ඒක විකුණුවා. අකටයුත්තක් අසාධාරණයක් වෙන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ කියන සහතිකය විතරක් මම දෙනවා.
Staying on the same subject, Venerable Jamburevela Chandraratana Thero arrived at the Polonnaruwa floodplain where a heated argument ensued between wildlife officials and State Minister of Wildlife Wimalavira Dissanayake earlier this week.
Venerable Jamburevela Chandraratana Thero was accompanied by several other Theros in his visit to the floodplain in Polonnaruwa. The attention of the group of Theros was focused on several places with archaeological value. The group of Theros also inspected the places where illegal grazing of cattle was reported.
A Secretary of State Ministry has stated at a meeting to not allocate funds needed by the government to take over this land. We did not appoint this government to hear these things. We have to warn these ministers as well. We can destroy these since we don't need the money. We should have brought the minister to show these. Then at least we could have held him accountable.
Head of the Police Legal Division, DIG Ajit Rohana, said that important recommendations to the Anti-Terrorism Act were not included in the final draft that was presented in Parliament. He said this while he was testifying for the first time before the Presidential Commission probing the April 21st attack.
He said that the government at the time planned to introduce an Anti-Terrorism Act to address the shortcomings in the Prevention of Terrorism Act number 48 of 1979. He added that on the 21st of April 2016, Prime Minister at the time, Ranil Wickremesinghe, had appointed a committee to draft an Anti-Terrorism Act. Head of the Police Legal Division, DIG Ajit Rohana, said that the Minister of Law and Order at the time, Sagala Ratnayake, the Defence Secretary, the Secretary to the Ministry of Law and Order, the Chief of Defence Staff, the heads of the Tri-Forces, the Inspector General of Police, Additional Solicitor General at the time, Yasantha Kodagoda, were members of that commission.
In international news, a U.S. federal appeals court has firmly rejected the Trump campaign's attempt to block President-elect Joe Biden from being declared winner in Pennsylvania.
Foreign media reported that the panel of 3 judges deemed the case was without merit, saying the Trump campaign had not made specific allegations or provided proof. The ruling is another major setback for President Trump in his attempts to overturn the 3rd November election. Yesterday, Trump again made unfounded allegations of massive voter fraud, tweeting, and I quote, Biden can only enter the White House as president if he can prove that his ridiculous 80 million votes were not fraudulently or illegally obtained, unquote. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals had been asked to consider a lower court's decision to dismiss the Trump campaign's attempts to invalidate millions of mail-in votes in Pennsylvania. The lower court ruling had paved the way for the battleground state to certify Joe Biden's win, giving him 20 vital electoral college votes and effectively the presidency. In giving the appeal court's opinion, Judge Stephanos Bibas wrote, I quote, free and fair elections are the lifeblood of our democracy. Charges of unfairness are serious, but calling an election unfair does not make it so. The Trump campaign has filed a slew of lawsuits alleging voter fraud in several states, but with little success. Biden is projected to defeat President Trump 306 to 232 in the U.S. Electoral College, which determines who becomes president, far above the 270 he needs to win.
Over to some sports news from here at home. The maiden Lanka Premier League is in full flow as the first double-header of the tournament took place today. The first game of the day was played between the Dambulla Vikings and Kandy Tuskers, while the second game between the Colombo Kings and Galle Gladiators, which was scheduled to start at 8 p.m, was delayed due to bad weather.
The Kandy Tuskers suffered their second straight defeat as the Dambulla Vikings eked out a 4-run victory through the DLS method after rain brought play to an abrupt close in Suryavava.
Because of the injury to Fernando.
After losing the toss and thrown into bat first, the Dambulla Viking reached 195 runs for the loss of 4 wickets during their allotted 20 overs. Dambulla captain Dasun Shanaka led the charge for his team when he scored a quick-fire 73 runs off 37 balls, which included 8 boundaries and 4 sixes. Samit Patel scored 58 runs. Chasing a target of 196 runs for victory, the Kandy Tuskers were on 84 runs for the loss of 3 wickets when rain stopped play. Subsequently, Dambulla Viking were adjudged the winners of the match through the Duckworth-Lewis method.
That is all the news we have for you this evening. I'm Tarusha Kumar Singh along with our sign language interpreter Tharaka Gabriel. Take care and good night.